there are 10 rules for strategic doing. We're going to go through the first 4, and we have some exercises. We want you to kind of get the feeling of doing at least part of it. And as Jim mentioned, it's all about linking and leveraging. We have tons of assets out there that we don't even realize, that we don't identify. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how to, first of all, identify those assets that people are willing to share, and then linking and leveraging them to find new ways of approaching our challenges. So strategic doing is about a new strategy process designed for open networks. So many of you, I'm sure, have done strategic planning. So a bunch of people get in a room and they come up with the plan. And typically those are executive level people who come up with a strategic plan. And then maybe a year later they say, okay, how'd that go? Strategic planning is something where we're doing and thinking all the time and we're adapting. The problem with strategic planning often is that it operates in this kind of old school hierarchical approach. So up here we'll do the thinking, Baba Louie, and then we're going to pass the plan along and you guys do the doing according to our plan. There's no adapting going on. We're talking about new solutions needing an open network approach. And so strategic doing is all about empowering those networks. So let's start with the rules.
We're going to go through these rules so that you get a sense of them. We're going to go through the first few in a fairly in-depth. But again, normally we do a training that takes 2.5 days to get through. So we really are going to be zooming on through. So the first rule is about creating and maintaining a safe space for deep and focused conversation. So the first piece of strategic doing is really about making sure that everybody feels comfortable and ready to collaborate. And that's really about committing to the idea that we're going to behave in ways that build trust and mutual respect. So there are many ways to do this. You can just sort of use this phrase and say, what does this phrase mean to everybody? Is everybody on board? Would you change the wording at all? Like, you just basically, the idea is to get everybody in the room committed to creating that space. And by the way, for every one of these rules, we have reams and reams of resources. Like that, there's a great book, for example, about psychological security that talks about creating that kind of space. And the reason it's important to create that space is because we have to build trust in these networks in order to have an effective strategic doing activity. So what this is just saying is basically that when we have civility, then we have a space in which words and actions between individuals in the collaboration can build on each other and grow over time. And that's what allows you really to scale the kind of collaboration that you're undertaking. Second rule is framing a conversation around an appreciative question. So is anybody here familiar with appreciative inquiry? So the idea of appreciative inquiry is basically, let's build on what we've accomplished rather than worry about what we haven't accomplished, essentially. I boiled that down really simply, but the idea is let's focus on the positive and let's not look at the problem that we have as much as what the possibility is for the future when the problem no longer exists or when we are in an environment that we want to create together. And this is, sort of just a quick representation of what happens when we focus on the opportunities rather than the problems. Over time, however we start the conversation, over time it's just going to continue in that direction. So if we start with the problems, over time we're going to see the quality of our conversation decay. If we focus on the opportunities, then we're going to start to see exponential kind of positive growth in our conversation. So in appreciative inquiry, the framing question should invite participants to discover how they can create shared value together. So the idea is it should be open-ended. The question should be what I would call a Goldilocks question, right? So it should be specific enough that we can really kind of focus on it. We can get where we're going, but not so specific that we've left out different possibilities for attacking the question. And we're going to give you a framing question today rather than work through with you how do we get there. But here's an example of a framing question. What if Bloomington, Indiana was the best place on the planet to be a child? So very kind of open-ended. Now what the problem might be, we don't know what the problem is that this question is trying to solve, but it may have been a problem about child health or problems where kids don't have access to opportunity or whatever, but instead of focusing on that problem, instead we're saying, let's create a world in which this is the best place to be a kid. You have to tell me when we're shift changing to. Is this now?
My turn.
Okay.
Yes. And to go back to the best place to be a child, that framing question for a second, what's really powerful about this is in Bloomington, Indiana, they had, let's say, 100 people. So they had a number of different groups. Each group took this completely differently. Some groups looked at education, some groups looked at health, some groups looked at particular programs, and as we'll talk about, the idea is that everybody does have a different perspective on it. And what you're going to do to set up your collaboration and move forward is based on who's around the table and what they're bringing to the table and what you can actually get done. We're moving toward action. And one of the kind of tenets of strategic doing is we're not going to be involved with something that we're just going to talk. We're already in way too many meetings where we're just plain talking. One of the people in Flint, Michigan, this is being used to great effect with people who, there are a number of big challenges in Flint, Michigan right now. And one of our colleagues who works on this says, I'll go to one meeting with people who say they want to get something done. I'll go to 2 meetings with people who say that they want to get something done. At the end of the second meeting, if we're not moving toward action, I'm not going to meeting number 3. And I think we can all relate to that. Now, we work at a university, work at a place. I don't often have the option to say, oh, I'm not coming because you're not doing enough. But I think that's awesome. And especially in a community change type of environment, we don't have time for that. We really need to move toward action. So what could we do? The first step that we'll take around the table is uncovering hidden assets that people are willing to share. And we often don't really think about the assets that we have to bring to the table. And Jim, would you mind passing around some of the asset cards that we have?
Sure.
Just to give you an idea of the types of things that we're talking about. First of all, when we're coming to the table to try and do some collaborative problem solving, this idea of you're not going to sit down at the table and come up with the solution. Don't try and bring, here's my solution. Bring a brick, not a cathedral. We're all bringing the building blocks to create a solution that we can work on together. So of course, assets exist within networks. Here are people who have different networks that they represent, school district, hospital, faith community. You see this, I know, with your work, and people within their networks have lots of different relationships that they can bring to bear. So when we're talking about mapping assets, there are lots of different types of assets that we've got. Physical assets, so we're trying to do something for children. What do we have? We've got a gymnasium, we have a school, we have a computer lab, we have meeting spaces. What can we bring to the table that we have control of? Skills, often, you always want somebody who can help you set up a website or, do kinds of technical things. Social, this is a big one. I am a member of the Rotary Club, or I have relationships with this group. Schools, in our universities, faculty members are in certain types of disciplines. So we have a number of these things, and again, it's a matter of sitting down and really thinking about it. Based on your framing question, what is it that we're trying to do? Which social groups and networks can you connect to? And then capital. I said before that we often people hit the brakes and say, oh, well, it would be great if we could do this, but nobody's got any money. Well, there are pools of money available. There are assets that we can go and tap within networks. And of course, importantly, as I know you all do in your organizations, we can look at how we can co-create resources. So I think that goes back to you now.
No.
No, I continue?
You're still linking leverage.
Okay, we're linking and leveraging. So you have a couple of examples of the types of assets that we're talking about. It's just these are some examples. So people, locations, programs, organizations. Once you start really thinking about this and trying to map it out, you really do have a lot to bring to the table. And in a few minutes, we're going to pass out these strategic doing action packs. And one of the first steps when we get together is people actually say, I've got this I can offer. What are they willing to actually bring to the table and direct toward this? So here's an example. The framing question is, what would it look like if all of our students were prepared for college or a career? So the people around the table said, all right, I'm at a community college, I'm the editor of the local newspaper, I have access to a community center, I'm part of a network of scouting leaders. So here's everything that we have. So what could we do? Well, first idea when we start brainstorming, the basic framework of strategic doing is we start out with what could we do? Kind of the broad universe of all the different ideas that we brainstorm together. Then we'll narrow it down to what should we do? Which of these ideas really seems like it's got the best opportunity for success to move us forward toward our ultimate goal? And then we get down to what will we do and how's that actually going to happen? So here's one idea, after school course in design at the community center. You've got the community center, you've got somebody around the table who knows about graphic design. Great, we're gonna have a class, that's one idea. And something we can do next week because the people around the table control the assets and resources needed. Idea number 2, we've got the local newspaper and a small pool of funding for projects under $100. Let's fund a contest for local teachers to design career exploration units and publicize it in the local paper. These are what we call pathway projects. We're not solving the entire problem of making sure that all of our students are ready for college and career, but we're taking some small steps, we're building the habits of collaboration as we go along, and along the pathway, we're doing things that are moving us toward our goal. So we are now going to go into a simulation. We're going to tell you about the mythical university, Western University, and set some context and actually have you start practicing some of the things that we're talking about.
Yes. By the way, I don't think there is a U.S. university called Western University, but I'm aware that there is one in Canada.
Like, that does not look like Western. Sure.
So this is not the Western University of Canada. This is one that exists in my mind only, although these really are institutions. Does anybody happen to know where these pictures are from? No, I don't remember. I think that might be the University of Vermont on the left, and this is, I think, University of Utah, but I'm not sure. I forget. So Western University, this is a little story to just kind of get you into, normally we do something called the strategic doing game, and it's a simulation, and we're going to do kind of a quick and mini simulation today. And this is the organization that you all are going to be collaborating around. So Western University is a very young university. It was just founded in 1971. It's near the Rockies. There are 20,000 undergraduate and 5,000 graduate students. And it's actually a top-ranked, even though it's a young institution, it's a top-ranked institution across STEM, social science, and humanities programs. And it's a private institution, but not-for-profit private institution. It's an athletics powerhouse. It's the home of the Fighting Tablespoons, which Rena came up with that. You know, the tablespoons, go spoons. Something important to know about it, in the 1990s, there was a lot of scandal at Western University. There were multiple leadership failures. There was corruption in the athletics department. The mascot went missing for a year. They were unable to find Mr. Spoon. So there were a lot of problems in the 1990s. So that, as you can imagine, that really hurt the university. There were some enrollment problems because of these things and so forth. And so the university after the 1990s really had to do some strategizing about how to come out of that. They are a designated prosperity university, and they came out in the 2000s to sort of do some new branding towards being recognized for this. In the 2000s, they really wanted to be recognized as a relevant university focusing on social and economic impact. And so they really did a lot of work to help people understand that this is the direction that the institution was going in. They're in the middle of planning and implementing a new innovation district, which emphasizes both technological and social innovation. It's going to include many new facilities and resources for research and teaching. And there'll be a lot of space for collaboration with partners, whether those are industry partners or community partners. But this has brought up a lot of questions for the institution, right? They're thinking about, how do we measure social and economic impact? If we're going to be about those things, we better be ready to measure. Who are our communities? Obviously, they're our backyard. The folks right around us in our neighborhood, that's definitely our community, but do we have other communities that are in other places of the world, or that are other types of communities, like the community of entrepreneurs in our region? How do we regain and sustain the public trust? Because the institution went through so many problems in the 90s, they've kind of lost a lot of that trust. They're now in an era of general distrust of higher education by the public, so they're asking those kinds of questions. And can we ensure research and teaching for the public good? So can we make sure that what we're doing is really being delivered all the way through to the public good? And in particular, as the picture suggests, this innovation district that they're building is causing a lot of challenges in terms of feeling like there's a lot of gentrification happening around that innovation district. How are we going to deal with the fact that we're saying we're doing things for the public good, but we're also inspiring a lot of things that don't feel like they're for the good of everybody? And I think we switch to you now, right, to do this, or do I can do it? Okay. So what we're going to do in our simulation is we're going to have you imagine that it's now 2025, so it's a few years beyond all of that scandal. It's well into the work that the university is now doing to be a prosperity university. And one of the things that the university has done is actually made sure that all of their impact efforts are connected. So one of the challenges that I'm sure you all have experienced is that sometimes it's hard to move beyond sort of individual point solutions in broader impacts, individual collaborations and partnerships, and really find a way to have that become much more institutional. Well, Western University has done that. They've made those connections. So the question, our framing question is, well, what does that look like and how did we get there? So that's the future. We're not in the future right now, but we're asking you to think about the appreciative question of all the university assets are connected. How did we get there?